Off the coast of Germany, there are islands that disappear. Not someday. Dozens of times a year, the sea rises up, rolls straight over them, and the whole island is gone. All that's left are a few mounds, each with a single farmhouse, standing alone in the middle of the water. Everywhere else on this coast, people built walls to hold the sea back. Here, they never did. No dikes, nothing. You'd think that's a failure. It isn't. Letting the sea in is the only thing keeping these islands alive. This is how a few hundred people live on land the ocean is allowed to swallow again and again and still call home. This is the Halligen. To see how it works, you have to start with the strange, flat sea that surrounds them. The Halligens sit off the northwest coast of Germany, near the border with Denmark. They lie in a place called the Wadden Sea. It is a vast belt of tidal flats along the North Sea coast, one of the largest in the world. The Wadden Sea runs for hundreds of kilometers, past the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. Twice a day, it drains almost dry, then fills again. It is never quite land and never quite sea, and the Halligens sit right in the middle of it. The 10 Halligen have names most of the world has never heard. Langeness, Hoge, Gröde, Oland, Nordstrandish Moor, and smaller ones still, some no bigger than a single farm. You reach them from little mainland ports like Dagobel and Slutziel on the far northern edge of Germany, close to the Danish border. Beyond them lies nothing but flat and open sea. There are 10 Halligen in all. Most are tiny. Only a handful are still lived on today. Together, all of them are home to just over 200 people. These are not rocky islands. They are low green scraps of salt marsh, barely lifted above the waves. And that is the whole problem. Twice a day, the tide sweeps in and out across the flats. Most days, the islands stay dry. But when a storm drives the sea higher, the water simply climbs over the land. The islands are so low that there is nothing to stop it. On the largest Hallig, Langeness, this happens 20 to 30 times a year. Almost nothing, anyway. One or two Halligen, like Hooge, have a single low summer dike, barely waist high. It holds back a mild summer tide, enough for a little farming. Against a real storm, it does nothing at all. The Germans have a word for it, Landunter. It means, literally, land under. When it comes, the fields, the paths, the whole surface of the island vanish beneath the sea. Only the little dwelling mounds are left, poking out of the water like a scatter of tiny islands. For a few hours, the map of the place is rewritten. Then the tide turns, the water drains away, and the land comes back. This is normal here. It is not a disaster. It is Tuesday. In a stormy autumn or spring, the floods can come one after another. The islanders barely blink. They have a way of talking about the sea out here. It is not their enemy and not their friend. It is simply the neighbor they never chose and can never move away from. So, how do you live on land the sea keeps taking? You build up. Every house on the Halligen sits on a mound, not a natural hill, a hill made by hand over centuries, piled up from clay and earth. They are called Warften. Each one is a few meters high, just tall enough to lift the buildings clear of the flood. Building a Warft was the work of generations. There was no stone out here and no rock to dig into, so people carried up clay and marsh soil, load by load, and packed it down, higher and higher, over hundreds of years. The oldest mounds hold whole clusters of houses. Some hold only one. The plan is simple. When Landunter comes, the low ground goes under, but the mounds stay dry. The house, the barn, the people, and the animals all sit safe on top. An island within an island. On Langeness alone, there are 18 of these mounds, scattered across the marsh, each with its own farmstead. When the water rises, each mound becomes its own small world, cut off from the rest. The houses themselves are built for the fight. The most precious rooms are up high. The ground floor is made to take on water and survive it. Heavy shutters and boards conceal the lower doors. Some families keep a boat tied up, just in case. Life here is arranged down to the last detail around a sea that will, sooner or later, come inside. There was another problem the mound had to solve: water. Not the salt water outside, but fresh water to drink. There is none in the ground here. It is all brine. So on the old Warften, rain was everything.
It was caught off the roofs and saved in tanks, and gathered in a pond on the mound for the animals. On an island ringed by an entire sea, fresh water was the rarest thing of all.
When the worst floods come, the barn fills up too. Cattle and sheep are led indoors, up onto the highest floor, sharing the house with the family until the water drops. For a night, everyone lives together on the mound, people and animals alike, listening to the sea outside. Now for the real question, the one the whole story turns on. All along this coast, for hundreds of years, people have fought the sea the same way. They built dikes, great walls of earth to hold the water out and keep the land dry. Behind those walls, whole regions were reclaimed from the sea. So why not here? Why did the Halligen never build a wall to save themselves? Because a wall would kill them. Here is the secret. When the sea floods over a Hallig, it does not just bring water, it brings mud. The North Sea is thick with fine sediment, and every Landunter leaves a thin new layer of it behind on the land. Over the years, flood after flood, that mud builds up. It raises the surface of the island, little by little, a millimeter or two each year. The sea, in other words, is not only trying to drown these islands, it is also feeding them. It hands them the very material they need to stay above water. A dike would stop all of that. Wall the sea out, and you wall out the mud with it. The land would stop growing. Worse, the soft ground would settle and sink, while the sea outside kept rising. In a few decades, a diked Hallig would be a bowl sitting below the waterline, waiting for the one flood that broke through. By letting the sea in, the islands let it lift them. It is a bargain with the ocean, and it has kept them alive for 1,000 years. People have lived this way on these marshes since the Middle Ages. In that time, whole islands have been born, drowned, split apart, and reshaped by the sea. The Halligen that remain are the survivors. They are the ones that learned to bend instead of break. People do help the process along. The mounds are raised higher as the seas rise. Some rebuilt into gentle climate mounds, 1.5 meters taller than before, paid for by the state. None of this is cheap. Raising a single mound can cost millions of euros. Germany pays it, because the country has decided these tiny islands are worth keeping. They help the mud itself along too. Out on the flats, people build long, low fences of brushwood called Landunter. The fences calm the water. The sediment drops and settles behind them instead of washing away. Slowly, the marsh builds up higher, one tide at a time. And the Halligen do one more quiet job for everyone else. Sitting out in the shallows, they take the first punch of every storm and soften it before it ever reaches the mainland coast behind them. In a great storm, the Halligen are the front line. The waves break over them first. By the time the water reaches the diked farms and towns on the mainland, some of its fury is already spent. In a strange way, these fragile islands are a shield for the solid land behind them. To live out here is to live by the water's clock, not the one on the wall, the one in the sea. The first thing a Halligen person checks in the morning is not a phone. It is the sky and the water. Which way is the wind blowing? When is high tide? A strong wind from the west on top of a high tide can mean Landunter by evening. Those two questions shape the whole day. The greeting here is a single word, mound. It works at any hour, morning or night. People are few, and everyone knows everyone. Down at the little harbor or along the rail track, neighbors meet and sort out the day. Who is going to the mainland? Can they bring back the post, the medicine, the groceries for everyone else? On islands this small, a trip to the shop is a favor you do for the whole community. Every mound has its Warft too. That is the person whose job is to always be reachable. When word comes from the mainland, a change to the ferry, a warning of high water, the Warft walks from house to house and passes it on out loud. On a Halligen, no one is left out of the loop. Much of the work is the endless work of survival itself. Many islanders are employed, in effect, to keep their own island alive. They shore up the mounds, mend the banks, and repair the damage each storm leaves behind. It is a job and a duty at the same time. And in the afternoon comes the ritual that holds it all together: tea. Strong Frisian tea poured over a lump of rock sugar with a little cream slipped in on top. There is a right way to do it, and everyone knows it. The sugar goes in first, a big crystal lump at the bottom of the cup. The tea is poured over it, so it cracks. Then a spoonful of cream is laid gently on top in a small cloud, and you do not stir it. You drink down through the layers, bitter, then rich, then sweet at the very end. Around that table, the whole life of the island gets talked through. The weather, a sick sheep, a neighbor's leaking roof. This is where a scattered handful of people become one community. Evenings are quiet. On the bigger Halligen, there may be a single inn where a few people gather over a beer and a game of cards. Then the lights on the mounds go out, one by one. Outside, there is only the wind and the sea against the clay. It is about as far from a busy German city as a German can get. And yet, it is not cut off from the modern world. Solar panels feed power to the mounds. A child can video call a friend on the mainland, while outside the window, the tide creeps up over a 1,000-year-old marsh. The Halligen live in 2 centuries at once. If you're enjoying this trip to the edge of the map, a subscribe genuinely helps this channel keep finding places like it. That's all it takes. Now, to the day the sea actually comes in. A Landunter does not arrive by surprise, not anymore. Modern Germany reaches even here. The islanders watch the same radar and weather apps as everyone else, often on a tablet at the kitchen table. To know exactly how bad it will be, they also call the pagel. It is a phone line that reads out the water level, over and over, in a flat computer voice. Everyone knows the number that means the sea is about to come in. When the warning comes, a calm, well-worn routine begins. Everything that must stay dry goes up. Vehicles are driven to the top of the mound. Loose gear is carried inside, and the animals are brought in. In a summer flood, the sheep often sort themselves out. They hate the water, so as it creeps up, they simply wander to the highest ground on their own, sometimes to special mounds built just for livestock. But in a hard winter storm, that is not enough. Then the farmers bring the sheep right into the barn on the Warft, out of the killing cold and the waves. Then the sea arrives. It slides across the flats and closes over the land. The paths between the mounds disappear, and now each Warft is truly an island. You cannot walk to your neighbor. You cannot leave. For a few hours, your whole world is one small hill in a gray sheet of water. You can see the lights of the next mound across the flood, but you cannot reach them. If a pipe bursts or a fire starts, you are on your own until the tide falls. That is why the houses are built so strong and why every family knows exactly what to do. It is also why many mounds now have a shelter room, built on concrete pillars strong enough to ride out the worst hours of a storm. A mound cannot be evacuated. When the water is all around, there is nowhere to run, so the safe place comes to you. So what do people do? They wait it out. They phone the neighboring mounds for a chat to check everyone is fine. Children get a day off school and play by the stove. Adults read or mend nets or knit. There is nowhere to go and nothing urgent to do. Many islanders will tell you it is one of the best parts of life here. The world stops. The sea does the deciding. And you simply sit, warm and dry on your mound, and let it pass. There is a strange peace in it that outsiders find hard to grasp. No traffic, no deadlines, no way to be anywhere but here. The sea has taken the day and handed back something rare, an afternoon with nothing to do but wait and talk and watch the water. Then, hour by hour, the flood drops, the paths reappear, the mud shines, and ordinary life walks back out across the drying land. The island shakes itself off and carries on. Reaching the Halligens is an adventure of its own, and getting around them is stranger still. In summer, small ferries run out from the mainland ports. In winter, the schedule bends entirely to the weather and the water. A trip can be delayed for days. But the most remarkable link is not a boat at all. It is a railway across the sea. From the mainland, a narrow-gauge track runs out over the tidal flats to the Halligens of Åland and Langenäs. It has been there since the 1920s. Along it run tiny open rail cars called lorren, some no bigger than a garden cart, many fitted with a small motor. The islanders drive them themselves, ferrying people, post, and supplies across the water on a thread of rail. There are no signals and no stations. When two lorrens meet head-on the single track, the rule is simple and old. The lighter one is lifted bodily off the rails to let the other pass, then set back down again. The whole line belongs to the islanders themselves. It is less a railway than a lifeline they run by hand, one small load at a time. When the tide is fully out, there is another way across, on foot. The exposed seabed becomes a road. People walk the mud flats to the mainland or drive a tractor over them. And these are no ordinary tractors. Out here, the tractor is the family car. Many are built up high with the exhaust pipe raised toward the sky, so they can wade through water more than a meter deep without drowning the engine. On one tiny Halligen, Suderog, home to a single family, the connection to the world is a postman. Germany's only mud-flat postman walks more than 6 kilometers across the wet sands to deliver the mail, timing every step against the returning tide. Every one of these journeys runs on the tide table. Miss the timing and the sea closes in around you. Out on the open flats, that is no small mistake. Even the mudflat walks that visitors love are done with a trained guide who reads the sand and the channels and knows exactly how long the door to the mainland will stay open. To one Halligen, Sudfall, guests are still carried across the wet sand the oldest way of all, in a cart pulled by heavy horses, splashing through the shallows at low tide. You cannot get rich on a Halligen. You can only make a life, and that life leans on a few things the sea allows. There is the coastal work, keeping the island itself in one piece. There is farming of a very particular kind. Sheep and cattle graze the salt marshes, the same low meadows the sea floods with brine. That salty grass does something to the meat. Salt marsh lamb from these coasts is famous, lean and tender and gently seasoned from the inside, and it sells at a premium. And there is tourism, gentle and small. A few visitors come each summer to stay with island families and taste, for a night or two, a life ruled by the tide. Almost everyone here wears several hats. The same person might mind the sheep, run a guest room, drive the Lauren, and turn out to fix the sea bank when a storm tears at it. On a Halligen, there is no one else to do it. You are the farmer, the ferryman, and the Coast Guard, all at once. The school, where there still is one, is a single room. One teacher takes every child, of every age, together. A lesson feels less like a class and more like a big, odd family around a table. When a storm shuts the island down, the teacher just sends the work over the phone, and the children learn at home on the mound. Even the basics take effort. For centuries, there was no fresh water at all. The ground is salt. Every drop people drank had to be caught from the sky and stored. Today, most of the inhabited Halligen are tied to the mainland by cable and pipe, bringing power and clean water across the flats. And then there are the children, growing up somewhere the modern world would hardly recognize. There are so few of them that a whole island might have only a handful. They learn together, all ages, in one tiny schoolroom, more like a family than a class. On Grode, the smallest municipality in all of Germany, the school shrank to a single pupil and now stands empty. Because after primary school, the children must leave. There is no high school on Halligen. At around 10 years old, they go to the mainland to board and come home only at weekends, if the weather lets the ferry run. It is a hard, early goodbye, and it is one reason these islands struggle to hold on to their young. There is no hospital here and no emergency room. A serious accident or a sudden illness means a boat or a rescue helicopter clattering in low over the water. Everyone here carries that knowledge quietly. It is part of the price of the peace. And some of the smallest Halligen have almost emptied out entirely. On Suderog, a single family lives alone on the whole island, tending it and its wildlife off the grid, making their own power from the sun and a generator. On Grode, the entire population would barely fill a small bus. And families keep finding new answers. On Suderog, a Hallig child now joins her mainland classroom through a screen. A small robot avatar stands in for her at her desk on the weeks the weather keeps her home. It is the oldest kind of isolation, met with the newest technology. The people out here are Frisians, with a culture all their own, shaped over centuries by salt and wind. And it is anything but a museum. It is Bika Brennan one week and a weather app the next. Every year on the 21st of February, the islands and the coast light up. Great bonfires, called beacon, blaze into the winter night. Long ago, the fires marked the moment the whaling men set off for the far north and drove out the dark of winter. Today, the whole of North Frisia still burns them, together, a fire festival, now honored as protected cultural heritage. On New Year's Eve, there is Rummelpot, when people in strange disguises go from house to house, making a racket and singing old songs in the Frisian tongue, and are paid in sweets and a warming drink. The Frisian language itself is old and rare, in places closer to English than to German, and it is still spoken here. Its oldest tales are full of the sea. There is Eka Nekapen, a shape-shifting sea spirit who muddles a sailor's compass and stirs up whirlpools, but who might also, in a kinder mood, save an honest fisherman from the storm. That wealth once ran deeper than you would guess. In the great age of whaling, Halligen captains sailed to Greenland and came home rich. You can still see it inside the oldest houses, in a grand parlor called the Königspesel. The walls are lined with thousands of hand-painted blue and white Dutch tiles, brought back by sea in the 1700s. One of them, on Hoga, earned its name the King's Room, when a Danish king was caught by a storm surge on a visit and sheltered there for the night. The women's costume, the Halligen, tells the same story of hard-won wealth, heavy with solid silver clasps and chains. The everyday version was cut shorter than mainland dress, for a plain reason, so a woman could wade the flooded paths between the mounds without ruining her hem. The food is honest and strong, made to last a long, cut-off winter. Salt marsh lamb, bread and pickled greens that keep for months, and a drink born just down the coast, the Farisair, hot coffee laced with dark rum and hidden under a thick cap of cream. The story goes that it was invented to sneak alcohol past a strict local pastor, who smelled it anyway and cried out the name in anger. You drink it through the cream. You never stir it. The winters test all of this. When the ferries stop and the storms roll through, an island can be cut off from the mainland for days. So the old habit of stocking up never died. A full larder, a stack of firewood, and a warm stove are not quaint here. They are how you get through February. Even the great moments of life bend to the water. A wedding is rare on islands this small, so the whole community comes, sometimes crossing the flats to reach it. Along the way, young people may block the path with a rope and let the couple through only for a coin or a bottle, an old Frisian trick. And when someone dies, the church bell on the mound tolls a slow, particular rhythm, the death bell that carries across the water to every other Warft, so the whole island knows it once. And on the wildest nights, when the storm howls and the water laps at the foot of the mound, the old stories still come out by the fire. Tales of Rungholt, a rich and proud harbor town that the sea swallowed whole in a single terrible flood in 1362. They say that on a still night, you can still hear its church bells ringing under the water. For a long time, Rungholt was half legend. Then, only recently, researchers found the foundations of its great church out on the flats, exactly where the old stories placed a drowned town. The sea had not invented the tale. It had simply kept the proof. Tales of a black dog with burning eyes, seen out on the flats before the tide turns. The islanders do not truly believe a ghost dog warns them of the sea. For that, they have radar and forecasts now. But the stories remember something real. Out here, the water has always been able to take everything in one night without warning. For all the hardship, the people are warm in a plain-spoken way. Doors often go unlocked. There is nowhere for a thief to run. A stranger caught by the weather may be waved inside, handed a hot Pharisaer, and told the story of the last great flood. And under it all, this is still modern Germany. The tractors are new, solar panels sit on the roofs. The forecast comes by app. The ghosts and sea monsters live in a museum on Hygge now. What survives is not the past itself. It is a way of living with the sea that the past taught them. For all its danger, the sea around the Halligen is not empty. It is one of the richest wild places in Europe. The whole Wadden Sea is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, named in 2009. When the tide goes out and bears those endless flats, the mud is not dead. It is packed with tiny creatures, and that makes it a feeding ground on a staggering scale. Somewhere between 10 and 12 million migrating birds pass through here every year, resting and feeding on their long journeys between the Arctic and Africa. At times, the sky is thick with them. When a flock of tens of thousands lifts off the mud at once, it moves like smoke, folding and turning in the air. Bird watchers travel from across the world just to stand and watch it. Out on the sandbanks, seals haul out to rest in the sun. Tens of thousands of them live along this coast. Hunters once nearly wiped them out. Now they are protected, and their numbers have come roaring back. Down in the mud itself, life is everywhere. Lugworms and cockles and tiny snails riddle the flats in their millions. That hidden feast is what pulls in the birds, the seals, and the fish. It is the engine of the whole Wadden Sea. The bare brown emptiness you see at low tide is really one of the busiest larders in Europe. Nothing here is wasted, and nothing stays still for long. And so the Halligen live doubly with the sea. It is their threat and their livelihood, the thing that floods their homes, and the thing that fills their marshes with grass and their skies with birds. To live here is to accept both halves of that deal. The deal is getting harder, and everyone on the Halligen knows it. The whole way of life here rests on a balance. The mud has to build the land up about as fast as the sea rises. For 1,000 years, more or less, it did. Now, the sea is climbing faster. Scientists and islanders alike wonder how long the mud can keep pace. The mounds are being raised and the defenses strengthened, but no one can say for certain what these islands will look like in 100 years. And yet the people stay. That is the quiet heart of the whole story. They could move to solid ground, to a normal life behind a dike. Instead, a few hundred of them choose to live out here, on land the ocean walks over whenever it likes. They have made peace with a sea that most of the world spends billions trying to hold back. They do not fight it. They do not pretend to beat it. They live with it, on its terms, one tide at a time. There is a kind of wisdom in that, and maybe a lesson for the rest of us. You cannot always wall the world out. Sometimes the only way to survive a thing is to let it in and learn to rise with it. So the next time you see a coastline defended by a great gray wall, remember the Halligen, the islands that chose the opposite. If these strange, stubborn scraps of land have earned a place in your imagination, share this with someone who would never believe such a place is real, and subscribe to come with us to the next forgotten corner of the map. And see it on some gray winter afternoon, when the sea rolls in and the land goes under, and a handful of little mounds sit alone above the water, warm lights still glowing inside,
exactly where they have always been.